All right, y'all. So, all right, Becky just came in. Okay, cool. I really kind of like by popular demand, folks were requesting a JavaScript project build. And it just got to a point where I was like, let's do it, right? It's time, because there are so many ways you can build your JavaScript project. And there are a couple recordings out there of how you can do it. But I want to show y'all kind of the way that has been most helpful for me when building out my JavaScript projects. And there are a couple of resources that we're going to leverage during this entire series. It's a 4-part series because I really wanted the project requirements for the JavaScript project. I really just wanted to do it in 4 parts so y'all weren't watching some like 6 or 9 part project build. So really the MVP is going to be built in 4 parts. The first is going to be today, right? Building and planning our Rails API. This is super crucial, right? Because it's kind of going to be like the foundation of our JavaScript app. And then part 2, which I'm kind of like foreshadowing here, and I'm going to share all these repos in the chat in just a few moments. But part 2, which I'm foreshadowing here, is going to be building out our routes, our controllers, our serializer. Part 3, so we're all the way in part 3, we're actually going to get to building out the single page functionality. And then part 4 is going to be refactoring that single page application functionality into OOJS. I have a few stretch goals where I would like to build out authentication, possibly build out image upload. So instead of the user putting in their image URL, they're doing the image upload, and build out some features. So all of that may come later, but right now this project build is going to be focused on, Sushi just got in, cool. So right now this project build is going to be focused on MVP, strictly focused on MVP. And for this kind of 4-part project build, we're going to be using first this Rails API project setup repo that I've referred to a lot in some of our open office hours. I'm going to put this in the chat. Cool. So that's this first one that we're going to be using. The second one that we're going to be using is this JavaScript Rails order of operations guide. So if you've been to my Sinatra project builds that I used to do, feels like way back in the day now, I had the same thing where I created kind of this order of operations guide because I felt we'll go through the curriculum, right? We'll go through the Learn Labs. But then we get to our project and it's like, okay, I have all these pieces, I have all these tools and all this information, but like what order do I execute them in? And what's going to be the best order that is going to yield to less confusion, less bugs, less headache. So I have that as well. And then I also have this notes file that'll be updating throughout the project build. So I'll share this as well. So those are the 3 kind of resources that we'll be using. And then obviously I'll also share out the repo once we build it. But before we get there, right, I'm kind of going to walk through these resources a little bit. This one is super cool because it walks through how the kind of like the little things that we may miss. So this walks through how you would set up your backend Rails API, not only using the API flag, right? Because we only need the API feature. We don't need our view files and all the rest of the Rails stuff that comes with a plain old Rails application. We just want to use it for API purposes. So we're going to make sure that API flag is present. Second thing that this walkthrough suggests is using a Postgres database. This becomes important if we ever want to deploy our application, right? So places like Heroku only accept Postgres databases. So we have that flag as well. So those are little things. It goes through Gymrack cores, which we'll go over we'll uncomment that gem. And we'll talk about cores in part 2. But it goes through kind of like the little teeny things, making sure that we kind of considered the foundational pieces of our API. And then it goes through how we would do that initial setup to make a call to that API from our front end. So this repo is very helpful for that reason. But what we're going to be following more closely is kind of like this order of operations guide, which goes through how I typically would build a JavaScript project now knowing what I know, right? Obviously, this was not the way I was doing it when I was a student, but now that I've gone through the headaches, gone through the rollbacks, I've gone through deleting the database, I now, or like, you know, wanting to go back to a previous commit, but not having any commits. Now that I know those things, I kind of we're going to follow a little more closely to this order of operations guide. And the first is talking about the project requirements. But before we get too deep into this project build, I want to kind of give y'all an idea of like what we're going to build, right? So what we're building is a syllabus sharing app. So for me personally, when I graduated from college, I was like craving the structure of a syllabus or just the structure of a classroom and learning in school. So what I started to do after I graduated was like creating my own syllabi. So, right, like I would have my own fall semester and I would give myself books to read, give myself resources and PDFs to look at, give myself projects to build. And this is something I've been doing for years. So I think like it's time to build an app, right? Where I can have all of those like personal syllabi for things that I've wanted to learn just as an adult.
Hey, Ayana.
Yeah.
What did you study in college?
So I created my own major. It was this weird hodgepodge of it's very, very corny major name. It's called Innovation Design and Society. So that just means I was in the business school, in the art school, and in like the women's studies and African American studies school all at once.
Wow.
So, and I took some
cool.
Where can we study that?
Yeah, it's very.
What school did you go to?
University of Maryland, College Park.
No way.
Yeah, I'm from
that
there.
That was like my second choice after Temple.
Yeah, yeah.
Literally debating between those two.
Yeah, awesome. I first went to school in New York and then decided in-state tuition was much more like it. So I decided to transfer and that's where I ended up. Cool. So now that we know what we're building, right? If we look at the JavaScript READMEs, that gives us an idea of the project requirements. Really the main requirements are, right, it must be a JavaScript, HTML, CSS front end, and a Rails backend, of course, obviously, right? All interactions between the client and the server must be handled asynchronously. Basically means we're making fetch requests to in our Rails API from our JavaScript front end. The biggest, I would say kind of like one of the biggest requirements is that it is an object-oriented JavaScript. This is super important because this kind of gets us acclimated to how React is set up. React is all an object-oriented. So having our project built in that gets us that familiarity before we get to React. The second or third requirement is going to be, right, has many relationship. So, right, the kind of example they give here, if you have an Instagram clone, you may display a list of photos with associated comments, right? So it can be photos, has many comments, and that would meet that requirement. Last and final requirement here is going to be, we need to have at least 2 fetch requests covering CRUD. So what this means, you can have a read and you can have a create, and that meets the requirements. You can have a read and you can have a patch that meets the requirements, right? You can have a read and have a delete that meets the requirements, or you can have all four, right? And you've gone above and beyond. So these are the four kind of like MVP requirements, and that's how we'll be building this project. But let's actually jump into it, right? So the first step's, right, checking the requirements. Second step is figuring out what we want to build. I figured out what we want to build, right? Choose a domain. We're familiar with a syllabi for independent study. Is something that I'm super passionate about and something I've been doing for a while. So it's something I'm going to be excited to build, right? So you also want to choose something you're going to be excited to build or may be able to use in your own life or in the life of your family. After we do that, after we've ideated, right? And that may take a week, right? Take as long as you need to figure out what you want to build. That's going to be important because you want to have fun while building this project. Because there is going to be a lot of times where it frustrates you, but having a love for the idea will help. Third piece, and probably one of the most important pieces, if not the most important piece in this walkthrough, in this part one, is going to be writing down our models, their attributes, and their associations, figuring out what our user story is, right? So in our case, the user story is going to be a user should be able to read and create a syllabi based on category. That's it, right? I don't have a user should be able to log in and create a syllabus yet, right? Because I'm not doing authentication yet. I don't have a user should be able to recreate a syllabi and save it to their favorites, right? Save it to their favorites can be a stretch goal. All I'm interested right now is that the user can read and create a resource. So one tool that I like to use is Draw.io to build out my models and associations. But before we get too deep into step 3, does anyone have any questions about the project requirements or how we would start to think about what it is we actually want to build? I feel like I've been talking a lot, so jump in whenever y'all have a question. I do not mind being interrupted whatsoever. A bunch of famous resources that I found a week ago. I'll post them. Cool. Thanks, Meg. Awesome. So now that we're clear on what our user story is, what we want to build, right? We're going to start to draw out those relationships and kind of draw this out using draw.io. So I'll put that in the chat as well. So literally just draw.io. That's what we're using here. Cool. So what I like to do is I first will do some text. So I'll say, okay, this is one of my models, right? I know I'm going to need a syllabus model. And based on my user story, this is a little small. I hope y'all can see this. Make this a little bigger. I didn't do anything. Okay, cool. And then based on my user story, I also know I'm going to want a category model here. Make this a little bigger as well. Bump that up to, I think we had 24. All right, so, but what's going to be the relationship, right? Is a syllabus going to have many categories? Or is a category going to have many syllabi? I like the relationship where a syllabus has one category, right? Just to start. Maybe in the future we'll create, right, a many-to-many where a category can have many syllabi and a syllabus can have many categories. But for right now, we're going to keep it simple and we're going to say, you know what? A syllabus is going to belong to a category. And that means, right, a category is going to, right, has many. So one thing I do not like about Active Record is usually they pluralize things really well, but syllabi is actually syllabuses. So please, it took me a long time to get over that. So I totally understand if it takes you a
can-
while to get over that as well.
You can change that.
Yeah, but
Not worth it.
not worth
Feel
it.
like that.
Not worth it. So I just was something I had to
I like how Connie was the first one to jump in there.
MVP. We don't
I was-
care. I'm
Exactly.
desperate over here. I'm hanging on by a thread.
Yeah, so MVP, we're gonna make it just syllabuses for now. If this, if it's something that's really, but usually Rails is good at that. I don't know why syllabi it didn't do it. But what attributes might we want on a syllabus? If we have either gone to school at any point, right? We may have gotten some sort of syllabus at the beginning of the semester, or at the beginning of right, that the high school schedule.
Of course.
Yeah, so because it's not really courses, it's almost like, let's say,
Is this for, you're making this for like your life though? Right?
exactly. So I would say the first thing is like maybe a title, right? Would be a good place to start, and that would be a string. So I also like to kind of give the data type as well. So we would do title. Something else that could be helpful is description. Yep, exactly. Jinxies. All right, so description. Something else that could be helpful is, let's say, an image. Let's say the person wants to give their syllabus kind of like a placeholder image. What else might need to be on the attributes of a syllabus?
Every syllabus I've had dates on it. I don't know.
That's exactly right. So date's going to be important, but luckily Active Record gives us a created and updated attribute with all our migrations. So that'll be taken care of, thankfully. Based on our associations, what might I need on this syllabus table?
A category ID.
Yes, look at that choir. I love it. So, right, we're going to need that foreign key. That's going to be super important here because, right, a syllabus belongs to a category. Whenever we have a belongs to in our association, right, we know we need that table needs a foreign key of some sort. And I've also mapped these out in our notes, right? So a syllabus needs a title, a description, an image URL, and a category ID. And then for category, for right now, right, a category can just have a name, right? We don't have to get, that's really all I see a category needing at this point. And then something we can also do, let's bring this to the front. Is that what that does? Yes. Right, so this is my syllabus model. This is my category model. I want to bring this to the front as well. And right, and then we're also going to say, I should bring this down for my own sanity. Okay, then we're also going to say, right, that this belongs to, so for me, right, this is how I kind of remember my associations, and I like to like visually see it this way, is like the arrow is pointing towards it, it belongs to it. And then, you could also do, I don't know if there's like an actual, I can't remember if there's an actual draw tool here, but like some folks also like to do the kind of like three-pronged situation over here, where that means it actually has many. But for right now, right, a syllabus belongs to a category. So we've done this super important step of
Wait, what do you mean? Sorry, what do you mean the three prongs?
Yeah, so if I could, there's
It's like two branching off to meet that
Right.
middle.
Yeah, I
one.
wish I could. So like if I were to do this, right? Like, and this is probably something I actually should have used, but if I were to do, okay, right, this is one model, this is one model, right? Belongs to is this way. This is really crude, but then has many is like this.
Okay.
So that helps me when I'm drawing this like on a piece of paper, which is usually how I draw these things, or in Draw.io. I don't do this piece because I haven't figured out how to do this piece yet. But like this 3-prong thing for me visually means has many. The arrow means belongs.
Has one.
Yeah, belongs to or has one.
Okay.
Cool. So I'll go back to our Draw.io, right? So this is an arrow. There's some sort of way we can get that 3-prong feature, but I'm not going to worry about it for now. We could probably just do this.
Yeah, I don't want to like, mess you up or anything.
Yeah, no, but I think this may be helpful for some folks to visualize it. I'm definitely a visual person, so stuff like this helps me. All right, so has many this way, belongs to this way, cool. So now, right, we've done part 3 where we've drawn out the models, their attributes, and their associations. So we've given ourselves a nice head start here. Then entity relationship categories has those connectors. Okay, thank you, Olivia. Entity relations. Nice. Okay, yeah. For folks who do this, thank you for helping us out here. Yeah, we could also do this for our categories for this as well.
Olivia, that's great to know.
Yeah, cool. So great to know. Right, so we've figured out what our associations are going to be, their attributes, our user story, all that has been done. Now we're ready to actually design our MVP and what our stretch goals are going to be. As I mentioned, to save us some time here, I have already outlined what my stretch goals are going to be, right? This is the MVP here. Stretch goals are down here. Authentication and authorization are not project requirements. So do not get too bogged down with figuring out JWT and bcrypt and all of that good stuff for your JavaScript project if that is not something that you absolutely need in your MVP. So I'm going to save my user model as a stretch goal. I'm also going to save something like image upload, which would be nice, and building out the syllabus features, which also would be nice, right? It would be nice if a syllabus could have many projects, could have many keywords and learning goals and required resources. But, right, because it would be a many-to-many, maybe not. We would have to think this through, but regardless, this is like, these are a whole bunch of new features. Keywords would definitely be a many-to-many, so we'd have a whole bunch of more models. So we're gonna save this as a stretch goal. But for the most part, I feel like we are now ready for project setup. I would not do anything else until we've done all of this stuff. So now I think we're ready to generate our Rails API using this command that we talked about earlier, which is coming from this repo. If you've joined us a little late, all of these links are in the chat. So yeah, we're going to use this command, which came from this repo. And we're going to go ahead and get started, right? So I am in my correct place, and I'm going to name this CEDA syllabus. CEDA, short for seed data, is what name I came up with. I like naming my projects because it makes it feel super like official. So CEDA syllabus, we're gonna do backend. Cool. This is looking good. Looks like I spelled everything correct. I'm gonna press enter here. And this is going to do so much stuff for me. Rails is going to do its thing. This is so satisfying to watch. Awesome. So we have now spun up that repo, right? If I check to see if it's there, it made it. And now we're able to CD into that repo. I'm going to do Command K here so we don't see all the rest of that stuff. Cool. Will this be recorded in the video library? Yes, that is the goal to give y'all this project build. in a recorded fashion. So this will be recorded and this will be published for sure. So now I am where I want to be. Awesome. So what's the next step here, right? We've gone through, right? So we're following this project build based on these steps. Replaced my app name with our app name. Next, we're actually going to create that GitHub repo. And in order to do that, right, we're going to create a new repository here. And let's do CETA.
Okay, I already see that I created the front end and back end, and only after I did that did I create my GitHub repo.
Oh, okay. So
Is that going to be an issue?
Both in one repo?
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, it just has two folders.
Go ahead. So that is totally fine. The reason I separate them out is because if you were ever going to deploy this, you only want to typically deploy your backend to something like Heroku. Heroku's really good with backends.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and then you could do something like deploy your front end to something that's better with front end applications. You could deploy your front end on Heroku, but something like I believe it's called, I still don't know how to pronounce it, Netlify. So
to be clear, you're gonna have two separate repos, one for the front end and one for the back end.
Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
I'll just erase it again. I've done it twice already.
But yeah, so that's why we're doing this project build, right? So we can see different ways of doing things. It is just much easier on yourself to have two separate repos, and that is also kind of like industry standard as well.
Hey, Paul's here.
Paul jumped in, broke up the girl gang. It's fine. We'll let it slide. Hey, Paul. Cool. So, all right, we're gonna go ahead and create our repository.
I just want to confirm, like you normally do that because like if you want to change out the front end, then you don't have to separate it from this repo. Like since they're already a separate front end and back end, you can just connect the back end to a different front end.
Exactly. Exactly. So what will happen is, okay, I'm going to go ahead and create that repository. I love that y'all are asking these questions. So, right, let's say and for those who don't know what we're talking about when we say Heroku, and is it Heroku.com? Let's see what it is actually. All right, that's not.
I have a question too. When we submit our project, are we supposed to do something different because then we have two repos?
Yes, that's an excellent question as well. So I don't know why it wouldn't let me go to Heroku just now. So excellent questions, y'all. So what I would do when you're submitting your project, if you have two repos, is submit your front end repo and link to your front end repo in your README. So then that way your reviewer and whoever is looking at your GitHub README for your front end is able to then connect the dots. And you can basically what would happen is, right, I've deployed my backends on Heroku. So instead of localhost 3000 that I will be calling on my front end, it'll be syllabus.heroku.com, right, as my endpoint instead of localhost 3000. So in your front end repos, essentially you'll be just making backend calls to whatever that deployed API endpoint is. And that you can deploy your front end on Netlify and then your back end on Heroku. Heroku's really good with like these kind of like back end languages here.
Okay.
Excellent questions.
Makes sense.
Cool. So we're now at this step 6 where we're creating our GitHub repo. And for this, what I like to do is, right, because we already have an existing repo, right? So if we look at Adam's launching here. Cool, right? Like we got all this fun stuff, look at all this green. This is exciting. So this is our new API that just got spun up. Notice there is, right, it's a little different if you were to dive into this because we're focusing on it being an API. So because we have an existing repo, what we're going to do is initialize the repository here and then connect our remote. So how would we do that? How would we initialize a repository in this directory?
Get init.
That's exactly right. So we'll do get init here. Nice. So we have initialized a Git repository in here. What do we need to do now? If we're looking at this page, right? If we've initialized the repository, what needs to be our next step?
You make your initial commit.
That's exactly right. Exactly right, Sushi and Meg. So we're going to we're going to add, right, all of these beautiful files that we've just created, and we are going to then make our initial commit. So we're going to get add, and then we're going to do get commit, right? And it can just be right, like initial commit Rails API. Cool. Look at all that. Lovely. All right, so now that we have done that, I'm going to do a Command K here so we can get rid of all that. What's our next step? We've added our changes, we committed. Yes, we need to add the remote. Y'all probably know this already, right? If you're at your JavaScript project, but like we need to connect our local repo that we just created using that API flag, that Rails generator, with this remote. This remote is essentially this, right? This is just our GitHub repo. We're connecting what is currently on our machine locally, what we just generated, to this remote, to this URL essentially, so that anyone basically pushing it to connecting it to GitHub server, so that anyone in the world can look at this code. So that's what it means by adding this remote, adding this kind of this URL, right? Adding it here. And then origin is just the name of the remote. This is kind of like standard to name your remote origin. Cool. So we're going to first do this get remote. We're going to add our remote. That's done. And now we are going to make sure we're being explicit by pushing our remote, right? Pushing to this remote origin, and we're pushing our master branch. We don't need to do this anymore after we do it this initial time. From now on out, we can just do get push, but this makes it super explicit that we have pushed, we set up a remote branch master to like our origin, which is what our remote's called or named. And then if I were to now refresh this page, I see all my code.
There it is.
There it is in the flesh, live and direct. So I'm going to make sure I'm looking at the chat. Yep.
You add a license when you created the repo?
So I didn't initially because our Rails API creates a README for us. So I can add that license in the README after I push up these files, but I don't generally initialize my repositories with READMEs because then we get conflicts because the Rails API already has a README for us.
Okay.
Awesome. Good question, y'all. Okay. So this is another thing that I personally like to do when I am building out my project. As it stands, this master branch is clean, it's new, it's fresh. We have not gotten our hands on it yet. And I kind of want to keep it that way, right? So what I'm going to do is, what I like to do is I like to create a new branch for building out my models. So, and subsequently, I like to build a new branch for every feature, right? Because it is convention. So fresh and so clean, right? That's taking us back to the 2000s. This is something I like to do because we always want to make sure our master branch is clean and working, y'all. We want to make sure there are no bugs ever in our master branch. This is because we know we can always, if we mess up too bad on this feature, we know our master is fine. We know we have working code there. And Git commits are another kind of safety net for this as well. We can always revert to a previous commit, but even better, we just know we have a master working branch. And then we can, as we develop new features, create different branches and then create commits on those branches and then merge those branches to our master. And that's what we're also going to be doing in this project build as well. So before I actually start to do that, does anyone have any questions about this step 7?
So would you say that it might be, is it okay to just do that locally and then merge to your master and then push up, or would you recommend like always mirroring your local with your remote?
So yes, your master should always be the same as your remote. But your branches, right, they don't get, I merge all of my branches in the GitHub GUI. So like in the browser, some people merge in the command line. I don't like doing that because then if I have to resolve conflicts, it's just easier for me to see in the browser. So master should always mirror your remote. And then we'll just like push our branches, push our changes to master, and then we'll merge in the browser. And we'll see all that in just a few moments. So mastering your remote should always look the same.
I had a question along those same lines. Cause like I said in chat, I didn't do that last time, and I really wished I had, cause I kept getting into these snafus, and I'm like, oh my God, like I tried to find where I could roll back to.
Right.
And I just couldn't, like, I commit often and write messages, but like, unless I was being really explicit, I wasn't able to find that part.
Yes.
So like when you build out something in a branch, when do you decide that it's appropriate to merge it into master? Like, do you working? But do you like go branch, you build out a branch and you're like, okay, now I'm going to merge this, or do you then like build out another one from that branch and then from that?
No. So what I would do is and where a lot of y'all's questions are about to be answered as we go through this. But what I'm about to do now is because the next step is I'm about to build out my models. I'm going to create a branch that says like category models, because I'm going to start with category first.
Cool.
And then once I do my migrations, my model classes and my associations for a category, then I'm going to merge and delete that branch, right?
Gotcha.
I'm going to do the same thing for syllabus, right? But I'm not going to do that until later, because as we're about to get to, we're going to build vertically. So, but there's a couple things I'm going to do first before we get too deep into all of this. And one of those is I'm going to bring over my notes. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it in here. So I now have our order of operations here. And then I'm also going to bring over my notes. I love having note files in my repos because it just helps me. So, and then I'm also going to do like markdown preview for that. And I'm also just going to do it this way. So, right, we've done this piece. We've done a lot of this. So, right, we've done step one, we've checked the requirements, we've ideated, we have built our wireframes, we have done all of this. We're like rocking and rolling here. And now we're on step 7, right? So now we're at this step right here where we're going to create a new branch. And in order to do that, right, we're in our master branch currently. What I'm going to do is git checkout branch. And then I should, if I remember this correctly, I should be able to do, right, a category model.
Oh, you spelled category wrong.
Thank you. All right, so.
And I
B?
believe it's a dash.
Yeah. And I could also just do dash B. Cool. Category.
I had
Oh,
a quick question.
yes.
So like, what about like security vulnerabilities in my repo due to the dependencies? How would I fix that?
Security vulnerabilities due to dependencies. So what do you mean by that? Like, are you talking about like your git ignore?
No, like for example, I have some issues with my OAuth.
So she means when you know, when like basically GitHub sends you a message and they're saying you have a security vulnerability in your repo because, you know, something new is coming, and then they usually either give you a patch that you can deploy yourself by doing a pull request, or they're just nagging you to say, because nothing has been patched or developed, you know? And you usually get related messages like from when I last did my Rails project, I've had a few about Nokogiri and
Yeah.
They do Dependabot pull requests. You could just accept the pull request that they send you.
I think for the OAuth, you have to do a patch request, and I'm not sure how to do that. I guess I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah, and I want to do an OmniAuth Rails project build for that as well, and then also do auth for this. But yeah, they usually give some sort of action for that. So I would have to see kind of like what it looks like and how we would implement it. So feel free to come to one of the office hours and we can take a look at it, because it sounds like it's for your JavaScript project, right?
It's for the Rails project.
Oh, for Rails. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, come to one of the Rails office hours and we'll take a look at it.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course. So as y'all have seen, like our master branch has changed to category model. So this is where we're actually going to spin up our models. Cool. So let's jump back to what our steps are here, right? So we don't even actually need to come here anymore because it's local. I just want to make sure I'm looking at the correct project here, and I'm going to minimize this so I don't confuse myself. Cool. So we have created a new branch for building out our models. Step 7 is done. And I'm also going to make a note here so y'all can see. So it's like git checkout dash B, and then you'll do branch. Cool. All right. So now we're going to move on to our kind of like last and final steps here. And we have an important note. So I kind of mentioned this earlier, but we want to be building vertically. The issue is, one issue that I always see so often, and I get the exact same thing, y'all. So I think a lot of us have kind of gotten socialized and trained in school to just like remember, and then when the test comes, dump it, right? Remember, dump. And that training really does not help us when we're learning code, because then we become kind of reliant on pattern recognition. So what I would do whenever I had a Rails project, right, is I would build out, let's say I had 3 models. I would do all 3 migrations. I would do all 3 associations. I would then go to my routes and do resources for all of them. Then I would go to my controllers and then just def new, create, update, delete, in all of my controllers. right? This is the quickest way to give yourself the biggest headache before you even start your project, really, right? Before you even have gotten a chance to enjoy the process, you're creating a whole bunch of functionality that you're not even currently using. You don't even know if you're going to use yet. So that's the quickest way to just get super frustrated within like the first couple of days of your project. So in order to just avoid that completely, we're going to build vertically, meaning from beginning to end, we're going to focus on one model at a time. And for that, in our case, because our category model is the one that doesn't have any foreign key, any like associations really, it just has that has many. It's not really relying on any other model. We're going to start with category first, and we're going to build our migration, our models out for category only. We're going to build seed data for category only. And we can then, what I would do if I were y'all, but because it's a project review, I'm not going to do it this way. But if I were y'all, I would follow category from the model and the migrations, the backend, all the way to making a fetch request to just my category model. And then create that association and add those associations on as needed, right? You do not, the biggest mistake is building out all your controllers, building horizontally like a layer cake, right? I got 4 models, so I'm gonna do all my migrations and associations at the same time and build out every single action method and some helpers for those controllers before I even have made my first API call. That's a no-no. So we're going to build vertically. Does anyone have any questions about that? That's a super important piece here.
So I built mine like horizontally, and I find it very hard to, when you're actually building out the database stuff, yes, compartmentalize models away from that, because they go hand in hand, and it's like you can test the back end independently with doing any front end stuff.
Yeah, that's true. And that's what we're going to do, because our functionality kind of relies, our syllabi rely on a category, a syllabus relies on a category, and a category relies on a syllabus. We're actually going to do both of our models at the same time. But I think the biggest issue is when we have more than 2, right? When we have 3, 4, 5, 6, and we're just fleshing out our controllers before we've even made a single API call to one model, right? So I think it's totally okay if you just want to get your belongs to and your has many built out, like your bare bones MVP built out, and you want to do the migrations and the associations for that and the seed data for that all at one time. That's totally fine. But I would stop at the controllers. Like I would be very careful before getting into the controllers, because that is where things get sticky and things get tricky. So I totally agree. We're going to need to build out kind of like more than one model here to test our associations, for example, step 9. So let's first, right, just focus on our category model. And again, we're kind of going to, where are we? Here we are. We're going to rely on this repo here to run that first model. And you see how this repo is a little out of order from the way I would do things. So that's why I wanted to give y'all this order of operations guide. So generating a model is all the way down here. So, right, but this should look familiar. Rails G model, whatever our model is, capital letter. And then we can do our attributes here. It defaults to a string if we don't have anything here. So let's take a look at what that actually looks like. I'm going to copy this Rails G model piece, and I'm first going to generate our category model here. Cool, right? We're on our category model branch. So I'm going to do paste, right? And then we're going to do category. I'm going to make sure I spell it right this time. And remember, we just said name. Keeping it simple. Category just needs a name. Let's run this. Come on, it's thinking. It's trying to do the things. Cool. It is doing the things. And let's check that out. Let's not take its word for it. We see some green over here, some newness. So, right, we now have our category model. And then if we were to look in our migration file, we now have a migration here. This is looking good. We don't yet have seed data. So what I'm going to do, in my notes, right, have already created some seed data here. Or am I in the right? No, I'm in the wrong notes. Okay, cool. So, yep, here is my category seed data. I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to plop it in here. So I know eventually in here, I'm probably going to do something like has many syllabuses, right? But I'm not yet going to actually use this because our code's going to scream at us otherwise, right? Because syllabus isn't yet here. So we're not going to worry about that for now. As it stands though, I'm pretty happy with my category model. So I'm going to do a git add. I'm going to do a git commit. Yeah, category model. The Zoom box is in the way. The Zoom thing always gets in the way. Okay, model and migration. Model, migration, seeds. Cool. And then I'm going to git push it. Awesome. All right. So now for this, and just a heads up, y'all, looks like we may go over time just a little bit. So for the folks who need to go at 12, totally understand. But look what happens, right? We now have this category model branch that's been pushed up to our repo. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to compare and pull requests. Able to merge. This is looking awesome. I'm going to create this pull request. Checking if I can merge it. Looks like I can. No conflicts here. I'm going to merge that pull request. I'm going to confirm that merge. And then I'm going to delete that branch. Now, if I go here, right, I see some of my commits now have been merged into master. This is how I like to build out my projects. Feature by feature, branch by branch. Anyone have any questions about what we've done so far?
So you basically merge on the remote, like basically.
Yes, yeah. I'd like to merge in the GitHub GUI in this interface because you can do a git merge in the console. That totally works. But I just get a lot of anxiety whenever there's conflicts. So I just like to resolve those conflicts in GitHub itself. I don't know about y'all, but GitHub still to this day gives me anxiety. So whenever I can avoid kind of confusing myself with GitHub, I just like to do it in the browser, but that's just me.
So if you've merged on the remote, but not the local, won't the master branch then be out of sync on the local? Because it looks, it's different.
Okay, so git master. So now what I'm going to do is git pull, right? And this is going to give me all of the changes that I just merged. So now my master is in sync with that. So what I should have done beforehand is show y'all how that when I checked back into the master, how it looks different. But this, you're doing a git pull is going to bring it right up to date with that remote. I would be careful with git pull because git pull obviously is going to overwrite code, local code. But as long as that master branch is always kind of like after we merge, we always want to do a git pull to change, like to capture those changes. So now if I look at my master, right, this is, right, I have all of my goodies here with me.
And then the branch is still there on local, the one that we're using to develop.
Yes, yeah, I love that. So if I do, I think I can do git branch and show all my branches. Yeah, so that's still there. I can do I believe a git branch dash D or something like that to delete it.
Yeah,
but I
git
don't.
branch dash capital D.
Yeah. I typically don't, because, you know, I may want it, whatever, you know. But I delete it in GitHub.
I also noticed on GitHub you deleted it and it says one branch. Does it keep track of how many branches you ever had, or?
Ooh, that's a good question. So let's go back. Right. So it just one branch means the master. But if we were to look at these commits, we could see that, there we go. So you can see that, like, this is previously where I had a branch here. This was that branch. So you can see kind of like in the commit history, where I've done my merges and where those branches are. And, you know, I typically delete them because you don't want to, when you're here, seeing like a whole list of branches that are no longer relevant because they've been merged into master. So these branches are relevant if you're still working on them, right? So don't delete it if you're still working on it. But if you're done, then go ahead and merge it, and it's forgotten about. Like, master now knows. Cool.
I think it's mainly like you want to keep the remote clean.
Yes.
And your local, you can just do whatever you want with
Right.
it.
Right. Especially since your remote's usually how you're collaborating with other people if you're building a project with someone else. But if you're not, still, you're collaborating with yourself. And you kind of want to do yourself justice and making sure you always have a working master branch in case things are crazy on your category model branch or your syllabus model branch, and you're like, never mind. You can still do a git pull from your remote and have some working code.
Also, Ayana, real quick.
Yeah.
I noticed that you use Atom for anybody that uses VS Code. If you use like the terminal in VS Code and do merges from there, they handle the merge conflicts
Yes.
inside VS Code.
Yes.
And it's like friendly looking, so it's not so scary.
Yes. Yeah.
And also, Git Kraken. I know I've like definitely talked about this before, but they have a GUI that's like magic. And for like handling merge conflicts, it's the best.
Yeah.
That's how I learned how to do it. And then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna put on my big girl pants.
Yeah.
And do it like a developer now.
Yeah, it's totally up to you. I have used all the plugins, all the things, and I don't like it, right? So it's totally up to you. You can use different clients. You can use, like, Atom also has a package that I could use for Git, but it's totally up to you and how you choose to do it. I just love GitHub's GUI. So I wanted to give y'all this kind of, so I'm going to do category here for folks and then name. Cool. So we have, you got
to put the G too. Rails G mod.
Yes. Thank you. Cool. So we have built out our models here. We are now going to work on, where are we? Yep. Okay. Now we're going to work on our syllabus model. So if we look at our notes here, right? Let's do the markdown preview so it's a little easier to look at, easier on the eyes. So we have here, right? We have this, we've done that part. We even have done our seed data for that. Now we're gonna move on to our syllabus model, which has a little bit more attributes in it. And we're really only gonna build this model out because I think it makes sense to take this time to test out our associations and make sure those are working before we get too deep into our controllers and serializers, right? So always test out your association. Start with the least amount of associations that makes sense to test. In my mind, since we're doing MVP, right? MVP only requires one has many. It only makes sense for me to test out that association, those two models. So that's what I'm gonna build. I'm gonna make sure that is in place before I move on to my routes and my controllers here. So same thing, I'm going to navigate back to my terminal here. And what am I gonna do? If I'm building out my syllabus model, what am I gonna do here?
You need to create a new branch.
That's exactly right, Carrie. So I'm gonna do git checkout -b, and I'm gonna do syllabus.
Carrie. Oh, man.
Cool. So let's do syllabus model, and we've done that. What is this telling us? Okay, we'll find out later. Oh,
So I think
know.
that's
I see.
uncommitted changes.
Yeah. We'll figure that out later. All right.
That's
So
it.
yeah, that's probably what's going to happen. So cool. So now I'm going to do Rails G model. Right. I'm going to do syllabus. And right, we had title, we had description. We also had image URL. And then I believe we also had category ID, which is an integer. I can't remember if it's integer category ID like this or
Isn't it big?
before.
It's before.
Okay. So the actual attributes before, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Integer. Cool. So category ID underscore integer. Everything looks like it's spelled correctly. Cool. Let's go ahead and get that up and running. Awesome. So this is also looking good. I'm gonna get rid of a lot of this stuff.
What version of Rails are you running right now?
I believe 2.61. I use 2.7 sometimes, but it's been giving me issues. So my RVM's on 2.6. Cool. So we have our syllabus migration. We also have our syllabus model. And I'm also going to add some seed data from that as well. Where is our notes? Cool. Down here. Awesome. So, and we also have category ID here as well. So, and that's associated with this category. So what I'm going to do now is I am also going to merge this model. I'm going to add, everything is looking good to me. I'm going to do a git add. I'm going to do a git commit. I could also just like run these migrations in these models too, but I'm just going to do that all at one time. So git commit syllabus model, and I'm going to do a git push. And actually, I probably should be merging these migrations in these branches themselves, just to make sure that like the migration was successful, right? Because if there's an error with your migration, you'll get that feedback on that branch. So that's actually best practice. Cool. So. But really, the point really here is that, you know, create features on different branches. so that your master branch is always so fresh and so clean, as Paul so eloquently said.
So you're saying merge it after the migration and
Yes.
then create a new one for the model?
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Just because, right, I'm about to create this, I'm about to do a Rails DB migrate. Well, I have to do a Rails DB create first, right? So like if we were to, again, keep looking at this, right, this file, we have to run Rails DB create, then migrate. Because it's a Postgres database, we need to create the database before we migrate. And we can't skip this step. So this is a little different than what we're used to probably. But just because we use that Postgres flag when we did our initial kind of spinning up, generating of our app here.
Mm-hmm.
So, but now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, on my master branch, I'm going to do a git checkout to master. I'm going to do a git pull. I'm probably going to get some issues because, oh, I'm not. Okay, cool. So we did a git pull, and now my branch has everything, right? I mean, now my master branch has everything. It has my my syllabus code, right? And all of my goodies.
But it changed back your README file, or no, the markdown file.
Yeah, probably. So anything I had in here, I believe I created a note in here for y'all. Oh no, that's still there.
Oh, okay.
So, it's probably still there because when I created that branch, it just
merged it in.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Cool. So we have done step 8, but we have not yet tested our models. And to do that, we are going to, again, like I'm going to give this project build a couple times. And this is a note I'm going to make for myself that like, we're going to do our migrations on those branches. But because I skipped that step, I'm just going to all do that here on the master branch, which is fine. We'll just figure out those issues and go. If we have any issues, we'll tackle that one by one. But right now I'm on the master branch, and I'm going to create and migrate my database, right? Because I currently have these 2 migrations. This looks good. Categories, name, syllabi has title, description, right? Image URL, integer as a category ID. This is all looking excellent. My C data file is looking good, but as you see, I don't have a database file yet, a DB file. That's not here. And in order to do that, I have to create that database and then migrate it. So that's what I'm going to do here. Creating that thing.
Quick question.
Yes.
So that's the only difference between doing the Postgres and not using it, is that you have to create the database first, and then everything else is the same. And besides the fact that with Postgres you can push it up for Heroku as well. Those are the only 2 differences between using Postgres and SQLite.
Those are the only 2 differences that we'll be able to tell, right?
Right.
If you dug into it, you'd see the differences. But as far as just like on the surface, everything else is pretty much like this.
Okay, it works the same. We don't have to do anything else differently in terms of our coding that we have to do for the project. That kind of stuff, it doesn't affect it. The only thing is that you're able to push it up to Heroku afterwards if you need to.
Yes, exactly.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome, y'all. So we now have a schema with all of our tables. And as we mentioned, right, we have this created and updated attribute that we can leverage as well. So now what we're going to do is our step 9, right, where we want to test these models and associations out. And to do that, right, we're actually going to create our associations here. Right now that we have both models that know about each other, we're now going to actually create that association in here, right? So as we mentioned, a syllabus belongs to a category, and a category
the syllabus needs the S and belongs to.
thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you. That definitely would have screamed at us. All right. So what this is, right? And this is just something that is just going to have to be what it is. So for all my folks that are like, why isn't this syllabi? I said the same thing. But this is now going to create our associations here. So now let's go ahead and test this. We have our seed data. Let's go ahead and actually run rake DB or Rails DB seed here. Either one will work. To actually seed our database. If something's wrong, it'll tell us.
I have a question about the that category ID.
Yeah, please. Let's talk about that. Do a toggle soft wrap so we can see everything.
Yeah, so it has that integer value.
Yeah.
Like data type. That's why I was asking what version of Rails you were running. No,
Yeah. Because there's a belongs to like data type we could use, right? That's what you're about to say.
Yeah, well, I think they changed it in 6.02 to something else. And it's been changing. So
yeah.
I'm just not sure what's the best one to use.
Yeah.
Because, they'll automatically assign it as a foreign key. And I noticed when you ran the migrations, like it didn't change anything at all. It just kept it as integer.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like another, I want to show y'all what that migration looks like. And that's something I'll just make a note to do. But yeah, there is an attribute. Yeah. Something like this. We could do this and that will, it's essentially going to just do the same thing under the hood. It's just going to be an integer data type. I believe it may come with more, must be a singular term if you use. I believe there may be some additional things it's doing under the hood. Maybe there's like some sort of validation that it's doing under the hood as well. But for the most part, it's going to be the same thing where instead of it pointing to author ID, it's just going to like be able to point to the author object and kind of know because of the way you set this up. So there's a couple ways for us to do this. I like the category ID like foreign key way because this in some ways is syntactic sugar. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a note to also kind of address, I'm going to do some more research into the docs as to like what is actually happening under the hood if we do it that way. So let's put that right here where it's like questions, right? First, why should we do our migrations in our respective branches, right? That's the first thing I want to make sure we address in our next session. But then also, what is the, can I specifically like link to this section? Let's see, belongs to association. Yeah, all right. Right, what is the belongs to attribute, right, in migrations doing for us? What's best practice, right? And then I'm also going to make sure we link to this as well.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, I definitely want to make sure that we're answering those questions. I just default to the foreign key integer. I know there's this belongs to attribute that we can use as well that will take in that whole object and kind of like know about that whole object. But I'm not sure what else it's doing under the hood. And I also just realized, Any other questions before we move on and actually test these migrations out here? These associations in our console. Y'all are asking some excellent questions, and I've been kind of ignoring the chat. Yeah, excellent.
There's nothing in the chat.
Okay. All right. Y'all are just talking to each other. Got it. Cool. So we're moving on to this last and final step here, which is actually going ahead and testing these associations in our console. Let's do that. So in order to do that, we're going to drop into our console, right? And let's first make sure what we're expecting to be in there is in there, right? So we have our West African art history syllabus in here. I love African art, and I just realized I don't know enough about it, right? West African art is different than South African art, different from East African art, and so I want to learn more about that, specifically West African art. So I am going to build a syllabus for that. And I also have some categories. If I can spell category correct. Right, I have some categories in here, and this syllabus in particular is belonging to the category of art, right? 3 categories we have in here: technology, science, and art, right? Kind of the basis of humanity. 3 categories. Now, let's check these associations out. And in order to test my associations, what do I do here? How would I test to see, right, how many syllabi in my database have the category art in it from my console? What do I need to do in here? I know y'all know.
Category dot syllabuses.
Yes. So, but the first step is, right, I need to grab a category, grab a single instance of category, because I can only call dot syllabuses off of a single instance of category, right? So I'm gonna do category equals, right, category dot, is art first? Yep, category dot first. So now, right, category is my single art instance. And you're correct, I can totally do syllabuses. I don't know, it sounded like, I don't know whose voice that was. But yes, you're totally right. We do category dot syllabuses. Where do we get this dot syllabuses from? Where do we get this method from?
Active record.
Active record.
Yes, I love that. We, right, at this point, we're like active record veterans, right? So we know where this is coming from. So, right, off of a single category instance, I can call syllabuses. The same thing for syllabus, right? I can call category dot category. So if I were to grab a single instance of my syllabus, use syllabus dot first, right? I can now do, right, in syllabus, single syllabus instance, I can do dot category, because, right, a syllabus belongs to a category. This is gonna be the bane of my existence on category throughout this project build. Okay, there we go. And we are able to return this category. So everything is working as we expected it to. We're in good shape. Does anyone have any questions or anything else they want to test while we're still in the console? Cool. All right, so I'm going to exit this. We have finished step 9. We're done. We are done with the first part of our project build. We did all of the initial stuff right? We planned out our API before we even started coding. We did our wireframes and our user stories. We made sure we drew out those models and the migrations. We figured out what our MVP was versus what our stretch goals are, right? We have some outstanding questions that we need to address, right? This is also why I love having a notes file in my project repo, because questions will arise along the way. And sometimes you're on a roll and it doesn't necessarily make sense to like stop coding to like answer every question that pops in your mind. So we have some outstanding questions there as well. But then after we've done our MVP and our wireframing, we are now ready for project setup. And we generated that new Rails app. We created our GitHub repo and we went through how we create a new branch for each feature. I could have created a branch for testing these associations out, but I don't know, that just felt unnecessary especially since we're kind of over time here. But totally do that. If you feel more comfortable saying, okay, you have a test associations branch where you're doing that and then you're gonna merge that to master, feel free. But then after we kind of decided, okay, we're gonna make out a branch for each new feature, we're now ready to code. Building horizontally, we did each model one by one and we tested those associations out in our console. And now we are ready to do our add of all of these changes, right? I'm feeling comfortable of adding these changes to our commit or our master branch. And now we're gonna push all those changes. And now our master branch has a working kind of like database with a backend with associations that we know work. In our next project build next week, we're gonna move on to setting up our routes, our controllers, and our serializers there. Cool, does anyone have any questions before we go? I see y'all in the chat. Yeah, thank y'all. Y'all make this fun. If y'all are a good group. If I was just kind of like talking to myself here, this would not be fun. So thank you for asking questions.
So awesome. And
Yes.
so helpful.
Yay, I'm happy to hear that.
And like it's really, really helpful that you make these markdown files to follow along with too. So thank you so much for that.
Thank y'all. It's nice to have that feedback, to know like what's working with y'all learning styles. So I'll keep up with these markdown files and we'll continue using these, right, as we go throughout these project builds. Sushi has a question. What's up, Sushi?
Well, I mean, this is probably out of the realms of the part, out of scope for this group right now. But I've seen, like, in thinking about how developers plan, I've seen some people talk about UML diagramming and going as far as like planning out their classes. What's your experience with this? And, you know, should we be thinking about this as kind of like the next stage of our planning?
Planning out the logic that will live in your classes?
Yeah.
I think I wouldn't do that in step one. Yeah. Only just because, like, with MVP, I would just focus on first getting those associations down, getting our controllers down. And then as you build your controllers, your routes, and then do the fetch calls, it kind of becomes a little bit more clear to you what special logic you might need. In our case, we're not going to be putting that much logic in our models for MVP. But if you have a super specific app with super specific functionality, those things, I think it's no problem to like note that. Like definitely put in your notes, right? Like I have some logic where I may want to do something special to the name of each category, right? Or I may want to slugify something for whatever reason, right? Like all of those notes make sense to put as a note, but I wouldn't really go as far as like planning that out and being too prescriptive of how it's actually going to look, because it may manifest differently after you get your controllers and your routes and your serializers spun up. I would make a note. I wouldn't kind of like build it out too much. I think the best practice for where we're at is kind of getting to a point where we can test our associations before getting too far in the planning or development practice. So as soon as we can test those associations out, then we can kind of like move on to the next step and thinking about the logic and the flow.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, y'all, and this is going to look totally different. This paradigm is going to look totally different, right? When you're developers on your own dev teams, but as it stands for right now, right? Like in school, when our collaborator is ourselves and I, this is, I would say, best practice is definitely getting used to the Git workflow of creating new branches, committing often, keeping the master branch clean. But before even all of that happens, wireframing and getting a true gist of what we're building. As I said, part 2 is going to be next Thursday, and that's going to be on routes, controllers, and serializers. If y'all have any questions, please feel free to Slack me. I'll also make sure I send y'all this recording as well. Cool. All right, y'all, I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm also gonna take a screenshot of who's here so I know who to.
Thank you so much for this.
Cool. Of course, y'all. Thank you for attending and for your participation as always. And I will see you next week. I'll see you around.
Also cheese.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.